The moment the catering manager grabbed my elbow, I knew my anniversary party was already over. His grip was firm but careful, like someone trying to hold a glass they were afraid to drop. The string quartet was playing in the next room. I could hear my husband laughing at something one of his colleagues said. That easy, open laugh I had fallen in love with 11 years ago. I was 2 steps away from the hallway that led back to our guests, champagne in hand, ready to give the toast I had been rehearsing for 2 weeks. And then he leaned in close and said very quietly, "Mrs. Aldridge, your phone is in the coat room. Someone left a note with it. You need to read it before you go back out there. Don't let anyone see your face. My name is Fiona Aldridge. I am 39 years old. I teach 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary. I make a butterscotch pie that my neighbor says should be illegal, and until that Tuesday night in October, I believed I had built a life so solid that nothing could reach through it and pull me under. I was wrong. The coat room at the Hargrove Club smelled like cedar and old money. It was a narrow room off the main corridor, lit by a single brass fixture on the wall, lined with wool overcoats and cashmere scarves that belonged to people whose names appeared on hospital wings. My husband Edmund had booked the venue 6 weeks in advance. He had told me it was a surprise, that all I needed to do was show up in the blue dress he loved, and he would handle everything else. I thought it was the most romantic thing he had ever done. I found my phone on the shelf between my coat and a stranger's burgundy blazer. Tucked underneath it was a folded piece of paper, cream-colored, the kind you find in a stationery set. My hands were perfectly still as I unfolded it. I don't know why. I think my body already knew that if I let myself shake, I would not stop. The note said, "He planned this party to distract you. Check the Meridian account. Tonight." That was all. No signature. No explanation. Just those 2 sentences in neat, printed handwriting that looked deliberately impersonal, as though whoever wrote it had been careful not to let their natural cursive show through. I stood there for a long moment. I could hear the party continuing without me, silverware against plates, someone's heels crossing the parquet floor, Edmund's colleague making another joke. The Meridian account. I turned the words over in my mind and felt something cold move through my chest. Edmund and I had a joint checking account, a savings account, and a retirement fund. I handled the household budget. He managed his business accounts. That was how we had always divided things, not because he asked me to stay out of it, but because I had never been particularly interested in the details of his financial consulting work, and he had never made me feel like I needed to be. I did not know what the Meridian account was. I put my phone in my pocket, folded the note, and slipped it into my bra because it was the only place I could think of that no one would find it. Then I walked back to the party. I gave the toast. I said all the things I had rehearsed. I talked about the night Edmund and I met at his firm's charity auction, how he had overbid on a terrible watercolor painting just to make me laugh, how I had known within the first hour that he was someone I would spend my life trying to understand. The room was warm and our friends were smiling, and Edmund looked at me from across the table with those calm gray eyes, and I smiled back at him and did not let a single thing show on my face. That was the longest 2 hours of my life. On the drive home, Edmund reached over and squeezed my hand. "Perfect night," he said. "You were perfect." "You too," I said. I waited until he was asleep. It took me 40 minutes of quiet searching on my laptop to find it. The Meridian account was not a bank account. It was a limited liability company registered in Delaware, which is where you register a company when you do not want people to ask questions. Meridian Advisory LLC, established 4 years ago. 1 listed managing member. Edmund Richard Aldridge. I sat in the kitchen with the blue light of the screen on my face and felt the specific, terrible sensation of a floor giving way beneath your feet when you thought you were standing on solid ground. 4 years. While I was teaching long division and planning summer vacations and arguing about whether to repaint the guest bathroom, my husband had been running a company I did not know existed. I went back to bed. I lay next to him in the dark and listened to him breathe. In the morning, he kissed my forehead and left for work, and I waited until his car turned off the block before I called my college friend Petra, who is a paralegal in family law and who answers the phone on the second ring for me, no matter what time it is. I need to know how to find out what a Delaware LLC has been doing, I said, without alerting anyone that I'm looking. There was a pause. Fiona, she said carefully, talk to me. I told her about the note. I told her about Meridian. I did not tell her how I had lain next to my husband for 6 hours and felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger wearing his face. Okay, Petra said. Don't touch anything jointly held yet. Don't move money. Don't close accounts. Don't do anything that looks like you're preparing to leave. And call a financial forensics accountant before you call a divorce attorney. In that order. I don't know that I'm leaving, I said. Another pause. I know, she said. Call the accountant anyway. His name was Douglas Ferris, and he operated out of a small office above a dry cleaner on Whitmore Avenue. He had reading glasses on a chain around his neck and a framed cross-stitch on his wall that said, "The numbers always talk." I liked him immediately. I showed him what I had found. He asked me to bring him 6 months of our household bank statements, which I had because I did the household budget and kept them in a manila folder in the filing cabinet in the home office Edmund never used. He spent 3 days reviewing them and then called me back in and sat across from me with his glasses pushed up on his forehead and said, "Mrs. Aldridge, I need to ask you something direct, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you know that approximately $42,000 has moved from your joint savings account into Meridian Advisory LLC over the past 14 months? The room went very quiet. No, I said. I did not know that. He nodded slowly as though this confirmed something he had already suspected. The transfers were structured to stay just under the threshold that would trigger automatic bank review. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. I thought about Edmund at our anniversary party, squeezing my hand in the dark car, telling me I was perfect. I thought about the watercolor painting at the charity auction. I thought about 11 years. Who else has access to that joint account? Douglas asked. Just us, I said. Just Edmund and me. I drove home in a kind of fog. Not the panicked, spinning kind. The flat gray kind, where everything is equally muffled and nothing feels entirely real. I made dinner. I set the table. When Edmund came home, I asked him how his day was, and he said fine. The Henderson project was moving along. Did I want to try that new Thai place on Friday? Sure, I said. That sounds nice. That night, after he fell asleep, I went back to the home office and started looking through the filing cabinet more carefully. Not his side, which I had never opened because I had never had reason to. I opened it now. Most of it was what I expected. Project folders, client intake forms, industry conference programs. But in the back of the bottom drawer, behind a hanging folder labeled Miscellaneous 2019, I found a large envelope. Inside it were printed email exchanges, account statements, and a handwritten list of names I did not recognize, with dollar amounts next to each one. At the bottom of the list, in Edmund's handwriting, was a name I did recognize. My brother-in-law, Edmund's younger brother, Stuart. I photographed everything with my phone, returned it exactly as I found it, and went back to bed. The next morning, I called Petra again. You need to tell someone else, she said. Someone in your life, not just me and Douglas. This is getting bigger than a financial dispute. What do you mean, Fiona? Structured transfers to a shell company, a list of names with amounts, his brother involved. This isn't just him hiding money from you. This is starting to look like something that has other people in it. I understood what she meant, but understanding it and accepting it were two different things. I had been married to this man for 11 years. I had held his hand in the emergency room when his father had a stroke. I had made his grandmother's stuffed pepper recipe every Christmas, because it was the one thing that made him look like a little boy again. I could not make the man in those memories match the envelope in the filing cabinet. That afternoon, I picked up my daughter Lily from soccer practice. She is 9 years old, and she has Edmund's gray eyes and my stubborn streak. And she talks constantly, from the moment she gets in the car until the moment she falls asleep. Which is one of my favorite things about her. She talked the whole way home about how her friend Cassie had a new dog named Pretzel and whether she could also have a dog, and I said we would think about it, and she accepted this with the pragmatic optimism that is entirely her own. I watched her run inside the house, and I sat in the car in the driveway for a moment, and I thought, whatever is happening, she cannot be in the middle of it. Whatever I do next, I do it right. I called my older sister Jeannie that evening. She lives 40 minutes away in Crestwood, and she has the kind of practical, unshakable quality that I have relied on my entire life. I told her everything. About the note, Meridian, the envelope, Stuart's name on the list. She listened without interrupting, which is unlike her, and when I was done, she said, "Where is Edmund right now?" "Work," I said. "Has he given you any reason to think he knows that you know?" "No, he's been completely normal." "Okay." I could hear her thinking through the phone. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without falling apart, because I need you functional right now." She paused. "Stuart called Warren last month." "Warren is her husband. He said Edmund was going through a hard time and might need some space. He asked Warren not to bring it up to you. He said it was nothing serious." My mouth went dry. "He called Warren a month ago." "Yes." "And Warren didn't tell you until now?" "Warren told me that night. I've been waiting to see if it became relevant." Another pause. "It's relevant. Someone had been managing the situation. Someone had known that questions might start circulating and had moved to contain them before they could reach me. Not Edmund alone, but Edmund and Stuart together, working in whatever direction that envelope pointed. I did not sleep at all that night. The following morning, Edmund left for work as usual. 20 minutes later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. No greeting, no introduction, just a photograph. It was a picture of a building I had never seen. A mid-rise office complex, gray glass, modern, somewhere downtown. The text below the photo said, "3rd floor. Suite 308-1. Ask them about Meridian." I stared at it for a long time. I could have ignored it. I could have put the phone face down on the counter and called Douglas and let the professionals handle it. But there was something about the handwriting on that first note, the careful, deliberate print, the cream-colored paper, the specific knowledge that I would be in the coat room that night. Whoever was leaving me these messages was not random. They knew Edmund, they knew our routines, and they were choosing, for whatever reason, to help me instead of him. I drove downtown. Suite 301 turned out to be the regional office of a white-collar financial crimes unit, not federal, but affiliated. I sat in a waiting area with a paper cup of water and tried to look like I belonged there, which is difficult when your hands are shaking and you are wearing a cardigan that still has a marker stain on the sleeve from a 3rd-grade art project. A woman came out to meet me. She had short hair and a manner that was entirely calm without being warm, the way some people are when they have heard very bad news so many times that it no longer surprises them. "Mrs. Aldridge," she said, "we've been hoping you might come in." I set my paper cup down carefully. "You know who I am." "We know Edmund," she said. "We've been building a picture for about 8 months. Meridian Advisory is one piece of it. There are others." She gestured for me to follow her to a small conference room. "We were not going to contact you directly. We didn't know what you knew. We didn't know if you were involved." "I'm not involved," I said. "I know that now." She said, "Sit down." What she told me over the next hour rearranged everything I thought I understood about my marriage. Meridian Advisory had been used to funnel consulting fees, which is a clean-sounding phrase for money that moves between parties in exchange for steering clients toward investments that benefited a separate group of people. Edmund's clients, people who trusted him with their retirement savings, their business capital, their college funds, had been systematically directed into products that generated commissions for Meridian and its associates. The list of names in the envelope were other participants. Stewart was not a small part of it. The total amount across all the parties involved was not $42,000. It was closer to $2 million. I sat very still while she said this. I thought about Douglas Ferris's cross-stitch. The numbers always talk. I thought about Edmund at the charity auction, overbidding on a terrible painting to make a woman he had just met laugh. I thought about how good he was at making people trust him. How many clients? I asked. 31 that we've identified, she said. 31 people, 31 families. What do you need from me? I said. She looked at me steadily. Access to what's in your home. Documents, communications. Anything in his personal files. With your consent, because it's your residence too, we can move without a full warrant process, which gives us a window before he has time to move assets. The envelope in the bottom of the filing cabinet, I said. The one he doesn't know I found. She nodded once. I called Lily's school from the parking lot and told them she would be spending the afternoon with her Aunt Jeannie. I called Jeannie and told her to pick up Lily and not to answer any calls from Edmund or Stewart until she heard from me. I called Petra and told her it was time to find a family law attorney. And then I drove home and let the people who needed to be there inside my house. Edmund came home at 6:15, as he always did. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. I heard his key in the lock. I heard him set his bag down in the entryway. I heard the specific sound of his footsteps crossing the hardwood floor, footsteps I had heard 10,000 times. Footsteps I had sometimes listened for in the way you listen for a sound that means you are not alone. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. He looked at the table. He looked at me. He did not look at anything else, but I saw something move across his face. A kind of rapid internal calculation. The kind that happens when a person is trying to determine how much you know. Fiona, he said. His voice was entirely calm. That was somehow the worst thing. Sit down, Edmund, I said. He sat down across from me. He folded his hands on the table, which is what he does when he is about to manage a situation. I had watched him do it at parent-teacher conferences and home renovation negotiations and dinner parties where someone said something politically unfortunate. He was very good at it. I want to explain, he started. You don't have to, I said. They already did. That was when the calm left his face. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to see what was underneath it. 31 families, Edmund. My voice was quieter than I expected. You sat across from them and you looked them in the eye. He started to say something about how it was more complicated than it looked, about how he had meant to unwind it, about how he had been trying to find a way out for the past year. Maybe some of it was even true. I didn't know anymore what was true and what was another calculation, and the terrible thing was that I might never know for certain, because he was very good at the parts of a story that made you want to believe him. I stood up from the table. Lily is with Jeannie, I said. You should call Stewart and tell him to get an attorney. And you should know that, whatever you're about to do next, I already did mine first. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not look back. Not because I wasn't devastated, because I was. I was devastated, in the way you can only be devastated by something you should have seen coming, but couldn't, because you were too busy trusting someone to look. But I had a daughter with gray eyes and a stubborn streak, and she needed me to walk in a straight line. The months that followed were not clean or simple, the way endings sometimes look from a distance. There was a legal process that moved slowly and involved documents I signed in offices that smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. There was a mediator. There was a period where Edmund hired an attorney who argued that my access to the home files constituted something, though nothing ultimately came of it. Stewart cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced arrangement, which meant his name appeared in the papers before Edmund's did, which was a thing I understood but could not entirely process. Lily asked me one night, about 2 months in, whether Daddy was coming home. I sat on the edge of her bed, and I chose my words with the same care I use when I am explaining something to an 8-year-old that is true, but needs to be held gently. Daddy made some choices that hurt people, I said. And now he has to be accountable for them. That's a grown-up thing, and it's happening between grown-ups, and it has nothing to do with how much he loves you. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is he going to be okay?" I looked at her, this child who had his eyes in my heart, and I said, "I think he's going to have to figure out what okay means now." She seemed to accept this with the same pragmatic optimism she brings to everything, and I held it together until after she fell asleep. Petra sent me flowers when the divorce was finalized. Jeannie came over with a bottle of wine and we sat on the back porch until midnight, and she did not try to make it mean anything, which was exactly right. Douglas Ferris sent a card that said simply, "Numbers and people both deserve honesty." I put it on the refrigerator. I went back to teaching in January. My students were working on a unit about communities. What makes one? What holds it together? What happens when someone in it breaks a rule that everyone agreed to live by? I sat at my desk one afternoon while they worked on their drawings, and I thought about 31 families sitting across from a man with calm gray eyes who was very good at making people trust him. I thought about the woman in Suite 301 who had been building a picture for 8 months. I thought about a note on cream-colored paper tucked under my phone on a shelf between a stranger's burgundy blazer and my own winter coat. I never found out who left that note. I asked the investigators, and they said it was someone who had become uncomfortable with their own involvement, someone on the edges of things who had looked for a way out that didn't cost them everything. I thought about that a lot. What it cost to do the right thing, what it costs to wait too long. The catering manager from the Hargrove Club sent me a message 4 months after the party. He had seen something in the local news and wanted to say he was glad I was okay. He said he had found the note on the coat room shelf with my phone, and something about it told him I needed to see it privately. He said he almost didn't say anything, and he was glad he did. I wrote back and thanked him. I meant it completely. I don't know yet what the next chapter of my life looks like in its specifics. I know that Lily is doing well and wants a dog named Pretzel, which I am seriously considering. I know that I am still in the house, which surprised me because I thought I wouldn't be able to stand it. But it turns out the house was mine before it was his, and the walls don't carry his choices in them, only mine. I know that I am sleeping better than I have in years, which tells me something I probably should have listened to sooner. What I know most certainly is this. I built a life I believed in, and some of what I built turned out to be built on something rotten underneath. That is not my fault, but what I did when I found out, that is mine. Every step of it. The accountant on Whitmore Avenue. The drive downtown. The cup of tea I didn't touch. The words I chose to say to my daughter on the edge of her bed. That is the life I am keeping. If any part of this story stayed with you, if it made you think about what you would do, what you might have missed, what you might look at differently now, I want to hear from you. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I think the people who needed to hear this found it for a reason. And I think your story matters too. I used to think that trust was something you either had or you didn't, that you gave it once, and as long as nothing broke it, it just sat there quietly doing its job, holding things together without needing any attention. I understand now that I had it backwards. Trust isn't passive. It requires your eyes open. I don't say that to be hard on myself for not seeing what Edmund was doing sooner. I spent a long time in those first months trying to figure out when exactly I should have known. When the signs were there, whether I had chosen not to look because looking felt disloyal, or because I was genuinely deceived, or some combination of both, that I still can't fully separate. That kind of question doesn't have a clean answer, and I've made peace with not having one. What I know is this: the moment I did find out, I did not look away. That part I did right. There's something I think about when I consider what happened to those 31 families. Edmund sat across from each of them. He asked about their goals, their timelines, their kids' college funds, their retirement plans. He used the information they trusted him with to make choices that served him instead, and he did it for 4 years without the weight of it visibly changing him, at least not in any way I recognized. That is a specific kind of moral failure, not a moment of weakness or a single bad decision made under pressure, a sustained, deliberate choice, repeated over and over to treat people's trust as a resource to extract from rather than a responsibility to honor. That is what makes it so hard to hold in your mind when you knew the person. I think about Lily asking me if her dad was going to be okay. She was 9 years old and she went straight to the question of his well-being, not his guilt, not what he had done. Children have a way of cutting to the thing that matters underneath everything else. She loved him. She still does. In the particular way children love parents regardless of what those parents turn out to be. I cannot tell her what to do with that. What I can do is show her every day what it looks like to face something hard without lying about it, to be accountable without collapsing, to keep moving in the right direction even when you're exhausted and heartbroken and you don't entirely know what the right direction is yet. Petra told me once that the people who survive this kind of thing, the financial betrayal, the legal process, the complete dismantling of a life you thought you understood, are not the ones who are the strongest going in. They're the ones who figure out how to ask for help and then actually use it. Douglas Ferris. The Woman in Suite 301. Jeannie on the back porch with a bottle of wine and no attempts to make it mean something it didn't. I was not strong enough to handle that year alone. I was smart enough not to try. That distinction matters to me. Intelligence isn't knowing everything in advance. It's knowing what you don't know and knowing who to call and being willing to walk into a room above a dry cleaner and tell a stranger with reading glasses that your husband has been moving your money into a company you had never heard of. It's being willing to look at what is actually there instead of what you need to be there. I kept the cross-stitch card from Douglas on my refrigerator longer than I intended to. Numbers and people. Both deserve honesty. Simple enough that Lily could read it. True enough that I needed the reminder. Some debts, the ones made of dishonesty, compound quietly over time until they become impossible to carry. Edmund found that out. So did Stuart. So did every name on that list. Actions don't disappear because no one is watching. They accumulate. What I'm left with, on the other side of all of it, is something I didn't expect. Not bitterness, though I had that for a while. Not even relief, though that came too. Mostly what I have is clarity. About what I will accept and what I won't. About what I'll accept and what I won't. About what I owe myself and what I owe my daughter. About the kind of woman I want her to watch me be. That, more than anything, is what kept me walking in a straight line when everything else was falling apart. It wasn't courage exactly. It was just that the alternative, staying still, pretending, looking away, was something I had already seen the cost of. And I had decided I wasn't going to pay it.